So hello again, James. Welcome to another week. How's things going with you?
Things are much better for speaking to you because yesterday I was having a terrible day, but I think that was just one of those days. On the whole, pretty good. It's been a relatively slow week, production-wise, few pains and problems, but usual stuff.
Was that why it was a bad day from a production perspective?
Yes. You kind of know when you're approaching the end of a relationship.
That bad? Okay.
Well, not that bad. It's time to move on. And for some things, like this, the same problem keeps on repeating itself.
Okay.
But I was playing paddle last week with a new group, and one of the guys, he's a lecturer here at uni. Interesting guy in the fact that he's Portuguese but has this very strong Australian accent because he moved to Australia young and has subsequently moved back.
Okay. Yeah.
But he was like, "God, it takes forever to get anything done here." And you kind of see it's either really fast or really sludgy. And I think something that I hear about making in Portugal often is how everyone's super friendly. If a bit brusque, that's just cultural norms. No one wants to let you down, but then they don't always tell you what you need to know timely enough because people don't want to let you down. Then you end up with this thing that happens, and almost the friendlier someone is doesn't always work in the communication because they want to let you down the least. And this one particular factory, made with for a while, quality's super nice. I just find it's more of a personal thing. It's a personal frustration when actually I just want you want to be able to know exactly where you are at any point just by giving them a call, not to annoy them. Again, it's not like constantly checking in with someone, but sort of you're just seeing how it's going. Like, has that elastic arrived? Like, because we're waiting on the elastic. Has it arrived, for example, or have the buttons arrived, rather than nothing. We're due to ship tomorrow. Yeah. No, we haven't had the elastic or buttons. And it's like, sure. Well, we have been asking repeatedly, and at no point have you said no, they're not here for any subsequent action to happen. So they were my problems, but they're really basic.
Well, I don't know if that's the only thing that I'd say is I don't think that that's a cultural thing specific to Portugal. Like, I mean, that's absolutely what I experience, and I don't know if it's personal to me and the people I've been working with. And there are factories in the UK who, the thing is, you've got to be doing well enough, but a dedicated project manager. That's how I worked as an agency. Every client had a dedicated project manager. And so we would stay in touch. And I think that's why we were successful, actually, is not because we were doing this incredible marketing. Like, of course, we were doing marketing that was in keeping and in line with what the brands needed. But it wasn't like something super special. It did its job. But we got jobs, I think, because we stayed in constant contact with our clients, telling them what was happening, being like, hey, we've just noticed that this day is coming up. Have you thought about doing something for that? For your brand, it would fit nicely.
Yeah.
Just thinking on their behalf. And I would love it to find a factory that had a project manager with me. Even if they were just like, Mark, just getting in touch with you. Very little movement this week, if any, because this, that, and the other. Next week, we're expecting the buttons to arrive, and we're going to be able to move things forward. Great. Thanks very much. I know what's going on.
That was my MO, learn to album, on just always being in contact, never to be annoying, but more... I mean, I ran all our production off 3 large Excel sheets. And this was schooled to me through when I worked at Levi's, and we were fitting out all their stores, and we had like 100 stores or however many stores. And my boss, engineer, loved an Excel spreadsheet, so we had this mega A3 we printed so much A3 color, it was ridiculous for this like blue, green and yellow spreadsheet. But we ran everything off there. Every component for the store, hangers, fixtures, screws, was run on this mega spreadsheet. And I applied that to garments. And we'd just sit there, print them out at the start of the week, and just call factories. I think I had one for garments, one for trims, and they all kind of linked to each other. But just would sit there at my kitchen table, these three, and just call through the factories and the suppliers and go, cool, zips have left, great, you know, da-da-da. And even if it was like, there's nothing, just calling in to check, you know, just to say hello because you're on my list, so I'm just going to say hello, won't keep you. And it ran really well. And with the exception of a couple of factories that then wouldn't pick up, and but I'd mop those up by going to visit them.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like that's great, and I think the responsibility goes both ways. You know, you are the client, and you're talking about you as the client staying in touch with the factories to keep things moving. You need a responsive individual on the other side, and ideally, if you can switch that over. So it's they're preemptively getting in touch with you.
Yeah.
Because I think what gets forgotten is that at the factory, they have eyes on it and they know what's going on. But the importance to you as the client as to when that's going to happen, when you're going to get your hands on that product or what's happening or the problems, it's like, I don't know, I guess it's because the factory is dealing with a number of clients. Whereas for you, it's individual to you, and you need to know what's happening so that you can move your business forwards. And I think that gets forgotten.
Forgotten by factories.
Forgotten by factories. The anxiety that the client will have if you haven't been in touch with them for 3 weeks, or you haven't picked up the phone when they've tried to get in touch, or you haven't responded to an email. Just the impact that has on the client. And the reduction of trust for an ongoing relationship.
Well, yeah, I don't think many people have any idea of the consequence. Well, they do have an idea. They're like a factory very much knows the consequence of trims not arriving on time, fabric not arriving on time. It's the communication to the brand to say, look, buttons haven't arrived, so we are, you know, if they don't arrive in 3 days, this lead time just goes back. But it's that bit that doesn't get communicated. It's like what is the knock-on effect of it? Because almost they don't care, because they'll make it and get paid. And I think then it descends, and I say it's a cultural thing because I'm here and I'm a different culture to the culture of the place I live in. But it used to happen in the UK, and I'm sure it happens elsewhere. I'm trying to word it in a way. They almost don't. They don't see the response because they're going to make garments and be paid for it. Certainly here and
yes.
say, well, you know, we've made it, so we paid for it. Even though you then say, but it's late, so our selling window has reduced. Yeah. And you end up in this uncomfortable dilemma. Not a dilemma, it's just bloody annoying, really. And it can feel like, because you didn't want to effing pick up the phone and tell me that this was going to be late, at the time I could do something about it, and now we've had empty shelves, you expect to be paid the full amount. Not saying that's a right way of, not saying that's what you should say or that's the right thing to say, but that's the feeling that you get, certainly with being, my experience was then seeing the direct effect of empty shelves in our shops. And you're like, we can't sell there because that's not arrived. And you're kind of balancing all the time.
Yeah, the ongoing impact of like people then coming into your store and seeing empty shelves, and do they come in again because it's it's affected your reputation, which is something that the factories need to be thinking about, because if your reputation is affected, if you're not making the sales, then you're going to come back to them with less. Instead of it being like this kind of symbiotic partnership.
Yeah.
It's very much like, well, this is our task, and we'll get our task done when we can.
Yeah.
And if it's delayed, so be it.
And I've worked with one factory that was really, really like this. They were in Long Eaton. They were a knitwear factory. They're no longer in business, but Jeff, I was going to say shout out to B&B Knitwear, but I don't think they exist anymore.
There's nothing to shout out to.
There's nothing to shout out to, but Jeff was amazing. When we got introduced to him, our stories, Al's mum was a dentist. Like this is kind of a long story. This is how we got introduced to Jeff. Al's mum was a dentist. One of her patients heard of what we're doing, like general dentist chit-chat, dentist-patient chit-chat. Oh, Alistair and James are making this clothing brand. Oh, I know. You should speak to Darren. Darren's like, I can't remember where he was, but we were on the way out to... We were on the Mansfield Road, on the way out to Mansfield. That's where the dentist surgery was.
Yeah.
And she said, oh, it's close by. He's got a dye house. Went to see Darren. Darren had its first time in a dye house, which just looked like something from an old, like, Michael Keaton was the Batman, like some old Batman, like chemical plant.
Okay.
And you're like, this is
right. Okay. Yeah.
totally like chop shops all around, and like it just an unsavory industrial estate, where often these places are in the UK. Went to see Darren, and then he was dying for stuff. Dyed us some white T-shirts. Put too much optic on. These T-shirts were glowing in bright sunlight. They were that vividly white. So we started to learn about dyeing there. It's early days. And he was like, oh, you should go and see Jeff. Who's Jeff? Like everyone was like, oh, you should go and see. It was like first name only. Went to see Jeff at this old school factory in Long Eaton. Brill. The first thing he said was, I don't trust you.
Right. Okay. I mean, had you done something to be untrustworthy, or was it just because you're a new brand? And...
We were two young guys, but I kind of like, I don't trust anyone. You know, he'd had some unfortunate parting of ways with certain brands.
Okay, sure.
But he was amazing. He was like, first thing was like, no one will buy just a plain white T-shirt, and then ended up saying to us, oh, I was wrong about that, you know, blah, blah, blah. Just all on experience. But his thing was super fast at sampling. He was on the phone to us, and he'd kind of gone back. Like, he was a big thing in Long Eaton knitwear and manufacturing at the time when they were making for like Marks and Spencers and all of these, like in the 80s, 70s and 80s, just like, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And the buyers were always on the phone, like Monday morning, all right, Jeff. And he was like, you know, can we get another 42 dozen black roll necks? And he's like, no problem. Blah, blah, blah. Like, really, exactly that. This, like, totally connected organism of buyer, factory owner, just amazing connections. So he was always like that. Yeah. I think that was my expectation of it. Very fast at sampling, like super quick at sampling. Marie knew every style code pretty much of seemingly every style they'd ever made forever. And it was like, what button was on J329? And she was like, oh, that was a 32 line. You're like, oh my God, like, how do these minds work?
Yeah.
But they just knew everything. And it allowed us to sell a lot of knitwear because they were just really, really responsive, very quick at sampling. It was like Roger had swatched up, you know, that afternoon, you go and see him. You go and see them in the morning, swatch in the afternoon, sign the swatch off, pattern. You were like, this is fast. And he said, because that's how you need it on your shelf. We need the orders. If we give you a good sample first time round, we know that you're going to order it. All of this like basic stuff that you like.
Yeah, just really nice. Just business. Good business.
Great business. Like really fab. So that kind of was my foray into it. And then you realise that, other people don't necessarily do this.
Sure.
Or he's like, James, we're 14 buttons short kind of thing. Rather than like, what do you want us to do? And we like, hold them or, you know, make them or we'll order more. They were just really like
Yeah.
honest, like, we need 14 more buttons, no problem, I get them to you. And some other factories were like, oh, we couldn't make any of it because we didn't have everything at the beginning,
Sure. Okay.
at the
Yeah.
start. And you're like,
Yeah.
it's like rigid rules.
Yeah,
Rigid rules.
which I understand, but it's definitely my experience of working in this industry. I don't know. Is it just this industry? I'm not sure. But what I did pick up on is, so you were talking about this spreadsheet that you were working
Yes.
to
Yes.
from Album, and you picked up that from working at Levi's. I'm really interested to know and to learn more about the retail side of things, because you have so much experience from that, not just from running a store, but multiple stores.
Yeah.
There's so much that I think that you could bring to the fore with that. And so what are you going to pull forwards from your experience with Album into Peace once you get into the retail side of that?
Okay. When we were best, we probably had the least, and by the least, I mean number of styles. Our stores were never big. I can't remember the square meterage of it, but maybe like 30 square meters.
Okay.
Not big. You could make something look really cohesive and tight.
Okay.
So people came in and they kind of knew exactly what you got in. And that was when we were very good, like not too many styles, but then some things working. Really, you're trying to encourage someone to spend as much money with you as possible whilst giving them a really lovely product. So things that we sold a lot of, obviously our jeans, it was one denim, 3 fits, easy, like there they are, da-da-da. White T-shirts, boxed up. There are the sizes. And this was also a balance, though. This was a learning. You need enough that you can keep selling, but no more that you have any left over. You're trying to ride that balance all the time, in my eyes. However, we got introduced to a private equity guy early on. I was like, if I was to give you, like 100,000, what would you do now? And I was hell bent on just opening more stores. I think my ego just wanted more stores, and he was like, oh, interesting, you wouldn't just buy more product. And I didn't see this at the time, bearing in mind I was 26, 27, like learning on the fly, but you need enough. And he was like, pack those small stores because your fixed costs stay the same. If you open more and more, then you've got more and more overheads, and just have those styles coming through. And I think that's the danger with retail and clothing brands, because you end up with this stockpile if you're not turning over quick enough.
It's a serious balancing act, right? Because I get what he's saying. And obviously if he's private equity, he is potentially only coming from the financial perspective. And he's saying, pack that shop full. But then, of course, from a marketing and branding perspective, that sets off alarms in my head, because you can go from very quickly a store that, let's say, looks like Waitrose, nice wide aisles, plenty of space, plenty of white space essentially around the products, to Aldi or Lidl. And it depends on where you are, and you cannot sell a premium product if it looks like it's being sold out of Aldi.
Yeah. So that was always a learning, like this real balance. And I think that's when you need a good product, but also where that shop is and the awareness. It's really basic shopkeeping. I think if you stick to the basics, then and we got basics wrong often, and then you're learning and you go, clanger on that one, and this was where we were trying to ride that balance of our cash flow permitting us to buy enough stock whilst turning it quick enough, whilst being able to make for the next round, because our denim at the time came from Japan. There was a 12-week lead time for fabrics, plus a 4 to 6 week lead time on making, plus a week, how many contingency weeks do you put in?
Sure.
And then you're like, wow, that's 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. So you need 6, 7, 8 months of denim cover.
Yeah.
So you're trying to wrestle these things. So that was a learning. What would I take from... Well, why do I say that? Because with Peace, things that... And you're not trying to pull the wool over people's eyes. You're still trying to offer a great product, made really well, lovely experience. The margin's got to be right, all of these things. When I was choosing denim, you can go into the amazing things for sure. And then you're like, lead time's long. And really, what's your stop denim?
Yeah.
What do you always run? And finding that mill means that there isn't a 12-week lead time on it. In theory, it's in stock.
Okay.
So you
have a bread and butter.
So there's
product.
So there's a bread and butter. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Exactly.
And then your hero products on top of that.
Yeah, which you can do a bit more specialized marketing with, because we then ran, we called it First Cut, which was made to order.
Yeah.
In your leg length with certain extra bits on it. We're getting this new denim in, there'll be X number of pairs, sort of what Painter and that kind of world. But this was 2010, 2009, 2010. So pre all those guys. And that was quite nice. So then we'd sell that out and then you'd end up with a bit of cover in the store or one store, but you were offering something a little bit more special. I don't know, it's like a right-hand twill, black denim, and that would come in. So it's trying to balance that bread and butter with newness.
Yeah, sure.
Because we had regulars that would come in every week wanting a new shirt,
Yeah, two different audience types.
Yeah,
that you're trying to, and they're both just as valid.
Both just as valid. So always trying to manage that thing, or there's something in there. We've got a new magazine in, or one thing that we did really well in was when people would go traveling, we'd kind of ask them to do a bit of buying for us. So a friend of ours, great photographer, John Spinks, he went to like Vietnam or Cambodia and he'd been there and he came back with these little scarves that he was wearing around his neck. We were like, where's that scarf from? And he's like, I'm going back there in 3 weeks or something. So it's like, okay, can you buy us 100 of those? Okay. So the store, or by the till, you'd always have those pickup items. So you're just trying to give it a little bit of point of difference. And then it was, because we had this blog at the time, back to old Blogspot days.
Yeah, you're showing me. Yeah.
Which was, I never realised that people kind of looked at it, but I would religiously, that was the thing that I'd religiously put, pictures up and just dump them on there. And people would come in and buy them and,
Well, this is it. When you showed it to me, and I was looking, so when was that? What year?
2000, we did that 2007.
Yeah, so pre-Instagram.
Oh, yeah.
And yet it had, like blogs, when you think about a blog, you think of 500 plus words, lengthy articles, because, and this is almost entirely, and it's interesting that you took the approach that you did, because that 500 plus words or whatever, that comes from a search engine optimization perspective. Because anything less than 500 words, Google would consider thin content, and you would be penalized for producing thin content on your website, right? So it needs to be 500 words plus between 500 and 1,500 words. So that's why blogs became this thing. That's why if you go, you're like, oh, I'd like a recipe to make pancakes this Shrove Tuesday. And so you have a look on websites and you look at pancake recipes and it's endless waffle about how they made their pancakes with their grandma or whatever.
Yes.
And you're like, where is the recipe? Just show me that recipe. And eventually you get to it. But that's because if they just put the recipe up, Google will penalize them for thin content. So, but what was interesting about your blog was it was much more like Instagram. There was an image and a caption, image, maybe a paragraph. It was much more like we would expect to see Instagram today. So it was like you were using it in that kind of like behind the scenes, founder-led social media marketing that's so popular now, but you were well ahead of your time.
It makes me smile because I don't think I've ever optimized for search anything in it.
No, I didn't. It doesn't sound like the sort of thing that you would do. But that's also because, also the benefit was that it was separate from your website because it was on a Blogspot site. So it wouldn't have really benefited you anyway. It needs to be on the domain name. So for instance, barnfieldcustoms.com/journal, any content on there is benefiting, lifting my website up in the search engine rankings for those terms. Whereas if it's on a separate website, Blogspot, you're not benefiting in that way.
Gotcha. So that's where things like now, AI can really help you. you'd be blurring the line between drivel, waffle, and something that's actually worth reading. But they can, if you bang in the right terms, you can just have this endless 500-word splurge.
You can, although if you haven't personalized it at all, if it's literally just straight out of ChatGPT, no matter what you've put into it,
right?
Google, there are certain markers that will identify to Google that it is AI generated, and if it picks up on that, again, you're penalized.
Okay.
There are websites you can take content from ChatGPT and you could put it in another website and it will un-AI it for you. The reality is that I think I have a bit of an issue with entirely AI generated content, because I think all it is regurgitation. Like we've talked about things, all pieces of clothing, all pieces of marketing, all business, they've all been done before, but if you're doing it off your own back, you're doing it in your way. So you're bringing James to it, I'm bringing Mark to it. If you rely on AI generated blog posts or content for your SEO, it's literally just taking content that already exists and regurgitating it. So I like to use, if I'm using ChatGPT or anything like that for content, I like to use it like I would work with an intern. So do the basic research. How should I structure this? What would be beneficial? What search terms should I focus on from an SEO perspective? Are they featured in this blog post enough to have a benefit from an SEO point of view, or do I need to put it in a bit more? So I kind of have this back and forth conversation with it, rather than just saying, produce me a blog post about the benefits of Japanese selvage denim, for instance.
Yeah, okay.
I've just totally segued into marketing again.
No, that's totally fine. I think I think they're one, and they blur the lines, don't they?
Yeah, true.
In it all.
True. So would you, two questions. One, if you were to summarize that first bit of information about retail and moving forwards with retail, how you'll approach that, it's having having a line, 2 or 3 products that are your bread and butter, that you're known for, and that you have good relationships with the factory and can bang out quite quickly, but also balancing that with innovation and novelty.
Yeah, I think having, certainly when you start, because I think then you're trying to discover on the job of how to do it. But when you start the retail, having a really concise offering, that really benefited us, because people understood what it was straight away.
Yeah.
And they were then much more drawn to the look. There was almost an avatar for our customer of it.
Sure. Yeah.
These jeans, this t-shirt, this shirt, and this jacket with these shoes. It was very easy to buy, which were running lines that we had, and then enough novelty to get someone coming back in, that if they didn't engage with it, they might not see it the next time.
Sure.
So
so there's the fear of missing out there as well.
Just like things where you're like, I'll pick that up. You might have come in the week before and bought 3 shirts, pair of jeans, pair of chinos, jacket, but it's just on your route. Like, that's why I love retail, because it was this kind of circuit. It was like a Saturday circuit for people. It's social.
Okay.
They come in, what music, what magazine, or who you'll bump into. Having that, our stores were very friendly, and nature of that, we had great customers, DJs, artists, this, that, and the other. So they bring a personality into the space. So people wanted to come to the shop. It was like hanging out.
It wasn't just a retail experience.
Or a retail unit. They were good. So I think having a really concise offering, which was great, gets people off the streets, because you're like, oh, what's this? What's this brand? Someone said to us early on, wow, I love coming in here because it's really well considered. The truth, there was a truth to that, is most of our product hadn't turned up. But we'd merchandised it in such a way that it just felt very fresh. When lots of stores were packing it, we, by the virtue of us being young and things not being delivered yet, we turned that into a bit of an advantage, and it was so stood out. So and then from a production point of view, stock fabrics are not bad things. Like when you're designing something, you want to make something special. It's just then finding it and what can you do to it to give it your personal touch or personal flavour. So with denim, it's like washes or not washes, or what are the things that you can add on there? Like we were talking about labels and things that, the things that cost pence, but they make pounds worth of difference.
But then the other interesting thing is I feel like there was a lot of stuff that you were doing that is only really being communicated now as the way to do it. So you were doing the behind the scenes, because looking at that old blog, like you were covering when you went to Japan, just a photo of the subway, I think, and just showing that, the effort that's going into the business and showing what you're up to, the founder-led side of things. Will you, because I know we've spoken about, you getting involved in social and moving things, starting to move things with peace. We've also talked about not doing it because the pressure it's put on me building in public. So there's a kind of a pros and cons with it. Are you drawn to doing that again?
This is a timely question. When early days in album, it was so exciting, and there was a huge sense of discovery for Alan, me.
Okay.
Because we'd not really been to factories before.
Sure.
We'd not seen knitting machines. We're like, look at this. This is a knitting machine. It's like got 90, cones of yarn on it. Isn't this amazing? Wanting to tell people about that. Because it was new. Like going to Japan, it's like, oh my gosh, and a lot of it was, it felt the right thing to do at the time. This has been something for me. We had a very well-known jacket at that time called the Fisherman's Cagoule, which was, if we'd had £1 for every one that had been, or that had inspired every other garment made by all the brands, would, I'd be on a yacht. Because it was just in
a fisherman's cagoule.
In a fisherman's cagoule. Yeah. I didn't want that. I wanted this exclusivity. So then I stopped making it. And it was like, no, I don't. As soon as other people started to do it, I didn't want it again.
Okay. Yeah.
But that's the nature of, that's a great business when people want something, and then you're,
absolutely,
keep on making it.
Well, what's interesting about that point, right, is so you made, it was a very personal decision. That was not a business driven decision. It was an emotion led decision. You didn't want, it had lost its exclusivity, and you didn't want to be connected with this kind of mass product. I was speaking to Amy the other day, and I was like, Barnfield is so me that, like, so for instance, there's an Instagram account that I follow called Gold Black Magazine. It's not actually a magazine, but it's just aesthetic, inspiring images that he'll publish, and it might be Steve McQueen in a shawl net cardigan on his yacht, the picture, and then you scroll through, next one on the carousel is, a lady on the beach in a bikini. Then the next one might be a classic car, it might be a cigar and whiskey. On the next one is this very kind of typical masculine aesthetic sort of thing. And I was speaking to Amy about it, and I was like, I wouldn't publish something like that, because as much as I can see it, and I'm like, yes, that, you know, like that's aesthetically interesting, I personally wouldn't want to be questioned for publishing pictures of women in bikinis or in their underwear or whatever. And so it's so personal to me.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm not saying that that would work for Barnfield or that it should, but what I'm saying is that you're making decisions very much based on how will people view me rather than how will people view the brand. And I just think that's an interesting, you know, there are plenty of brands out there that are completely divorced from their founders. And there would be no question. It'd be like, well, what could work?
Yeah.
And potentially that's the more important question.
Yeah. It's the emotions. I mean, I've made many decisions in that retail world based on emotions. But it's sort of, now, when I return to it, I mean, you can do those things looking back on it. And I don't think I was driven. Well, I wasn't driven by the money, actually. And I think if I had been, I'd have made different decisions.
Sure.
You'd have squeezed it, and we'd have charged a bit more, and, you know, driven the costs. I think mine was to make a really, really good product that people had an emotional response to, and I think they did.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a longer game.
It is, I personally think it's a successful game, because if you just go on price alone, you're going to make very different decisions, and there's no that, you know, like, and they all seem to come back to the longevity of the brand. You have to make decisions that keep you sustainable in terms of, I'm not talking about ecologically sustainable. I mean, from a business perspective, that you can continue to employ the people that work for you, that you can continue to invest in the fabrics and that sort of stuff. So you do need to price your products accordingly and make those decisions. But if you're fully just focused on the finance side of things, it's just a race to the bottom.
Yeah, the other thing that I would do in retail is pay more attention to margins. And again, we priced emotionally based on what we felt at the time was a good price. Like this. Sometimes I think it's because I'm from Nottingham. We're from Nottingham, and there was this Robin Hood mentality of offering something so good at like this price that you're like, wow, that's an amazing price. What I realize is, when someone says that, it's like there's a catch behind that that's allowed that price, because it's really easy to brands would come in and they're like, how do you make it, you know, how do you use that quality and sell it for that price? And after a while, you know, because we knew who they were, and it was more of an industry chat, it's like, because we don't charge what perhaps we should be charging, we charge what we think we should.
Your markup's not right.
The markup's not right. And I I can laugh about it now, but we didn't realize, actually what that, you know, an extra 5-10 quid on the shirt does to your bottom line.
Yeah.
Does an amazing thing. Does an absolutely brilliant thing. And no one really knows the difference. We were just like, oh, wow. When we started, our shirts were Italian fabric, made in Portugal, £62.
Okay.
£62 and £67.
Yeah.
Made in factories that were making for Dries, Paul Smith, a Dunhill, like top Visbim, like £62.
What? And what would they have been charging?
£150, £200.
Yeah. And I think that there's a lot, because people, like, I've seen people, because obviously I follow a lot of startup brands on TikTok and all of that. And there's always commentary around, you know, how could you possibly be charging that? You're just a small brand. And I'm like, that makes no difference at all. I get it. You know, a brand that you've just rattled off, Dunhill, Paul Smith, whatever, they have huge brand equity but doesn't mean that the product is any different. So all you're paying for is that heritage and the brand equity.
Yeah, I think that
There's
there's
no
confidence as well.
difference.
I think there's real confidence in. We weren't confident. We had great success, but we weren't confident, and maybe didn't believe.
Well, you were young.
We were young.
You were young as well.
But you get other people that are like, right, just, that are young and a bit more arrogant. I've suffered from this thing of like kind of being confident / arrogant / having tremendous belief whilst being terribly insecure, rather than that real sweet spot where you're just like, this is what it costs.
But I think I think that's a lot of people, and all it is just a slight tweak and being like, I'm confident that this is the right product. I'm insecure about putting that price in front of it or on it. But if I look at it and I'm like, if I want this business to survive, but what we're saying here is, Album did survive. Album was bought and continues to survive today. So all of these are not, you can look back and you can question what you were doing, but they were clearly not bad choices. You could have made different choices, but they weren't bad choices.
Yeah, some of the things, I wonder if when we started, making in the UK and the manufacturing supply route we ended up going with was partly luck, partly necessity of not having enough money to have done it in the making the Far East, bigger minimums. It was like, okay, well, we can't afford to make 300 jackets, so how do we do this? We made in the UK and we made 12 to begin with.
Sure.
We bought fabric that we had to, because we were going to make in Portugal. We kind of got stiffed, but didn't really realise, had to buy 500 metres of cloth, but which you'll know that problem actually served us in good stead, because we had it for the next season to repeat the coat kind of thing. So there were some benefits.
As long as the cash flow's there.
Yeah. There were some things. And that was just like a great, 600 gram Melton or 650 gram Melton.
Oh, I'd have some of that now, please.
Yeah, it was like 85, like an 80-20 blend, but it was really good for the jacket that we were doing. We did this Melton, card coat. I think we charged like 195 quid for it, made in England.
Right.
Again, like your eyes.
Okay, we're talking. Obviously, we're talking years ago, but even if we adjust for inflation,
we were underselling it.
Sure.
Quite heavily, really. And now I think doing it again, it's like the markup basic should be 5 times. Like if it costs you 50 quid, that's 250 quid.
Yeah.
Like that's what it should be, and that gives you leeway.
There are industry standards for a reason. I mean, if you can do direct to consumer, then you can adjust that to an extent.
But I don't know how much, actually, because you still get in, like everything gets skewed, doesn't it? It's almost like it's been passed through an AI filter, because you're trying to compare like for like, but you can't really. Is that real? Is that good quality? And we would still have customers. A few years later, I remember chatting to a couple of guys, and they were like, "Yeah, we never thought much of your fabric selection. We always thought they were a bit cheap." And they liked another brand, and I was like, those fabrics that they're buying, I know for a fact they're just like, they were great fabrics. They were like army surplus fabrics, but they were like basic, like super basic. Ours were more expensive.
Yeah.
And so it's perception, and maybe if we charge £200
Yeah.
for the
And
shirt, it would be different. You sell less, but you make more.
There would be yeah. And also a perception at £200 that the fabric is better quality.
Yeah.
There's an assumption based on price for sure.
So I think it's, you get those things. So margin would be.
I was going to ask you, I was going to ask you about when you were when you were doing the layout of your retail stores, and what I liked is when you were talking about it, a customer saying that it was considered, which was what it appeared, but actually it was just that you didn't have the product. But nevertheless, I think considered is good. And how were you laying out your jeans? Because I often find the jeans, there's so much choice, whether it's the cut, whether it's the wash, whether it's a finish, whatever it is, you can end up in a situation where you're just like, I don't know what I'm looking at. And I end up just walking out.
So at that time, I'd come from Levi's. Big thing for us in the stores was the Levi's fit guide. I do remember a big Barney between the president of retail ops and the president of brand, like where I was sitting. We had this open walkway and just this exchange of words between the two on the importance of this fit guide and making it look like the brand. So that always sticks with me, and it stuck with me, still sticks with me now, but definitely with album days. We only had one fit of jean when we started.
Okay.
Super easy. That was just like the album straight leg jean.
Yeah.
We had two denims. One was a European made 12.5 ounce, slightly waxy. It was overly indigo dyed, so it had this nice waxy texture on it. It's quite light. And then we had
I know what you're talking about.
We had a black Japanese denim dead stock that Canty had, which was one of our factories. He just had on the shelf. So when we first started, we had 100 pairs of this waxy indigo, and we had 14 pairs of this dead stock because that's all he had, because it was dead stock.
Yeah.
So it was very easy. It's one fit, choose your denim, and you're away. The black one's sold, apart from the big sizes, we always found we had too many big sizes. Then we introduced new fits, but we always hung the jeans on hangers as part of garments, upside down. That was something for me, like you'd hang a pair of trousers. I always liked a pair of jeans hanging up in a store. And then we had a fit guide, sewing depending on which store, but we had 3 fits: slim, classic. We had the slim fit, classic, and then the straight leg. And then we did a denim chino that might get, go onto that fit guide. But we were always quite concise. We then only had one denim, which was a Japanese 13.5 ounce raw indigo denim. They all had a standard leg, which was a long leg that we adjusted for people.
Nice.
So we made it as easy as possible.
Yeah.
We then wanted to introduce, I started getting just more as I learned. It's I'd quite like to do a washed pair, and can we do a washed pair? And then you bring those in, but the fits would be the same. But we'd give customers a lot of time when they bought a pair of jeans. Certainly when that was kind of our thing, because raw denim was really uncomfortable when you buy it, stiff as a board. The legs were 6 inches too long. In terms of going, does it fit well? No, raw jeans fit terribly when they start, absolutely terribly. So you kind of need someone to take the time with you, show them what they look like after they've been worn. So we had our old pairs in the stores, and it's okay, that's 3 months of heavy wear, that's 6 months of heavy wear,
nice.
that's 12 months of heavy wear. They will shrink like this. We did all that for people. We kind of took the heavy lifting out, but we'd give people time because they were uncomfortable. But they sold really well, and they were a great price. Again, a bit underpriced. I think we started off selling Japanese denim selling it for £85. Then it went up to 95. But it was, you got a lot of gene for your money, made in England, all the bells and whistles on.
Yeah.
Again, we'd have people going, oh, I can go to Uniqlo and buy that. And it's like,
Yes, you can.
they do make probably 1 million pairs of those, and they're amazing, and absolutely go and buy it. But if you like what we do and want to support us, then buy what we do. But it was easy. I think that there were some parts of what we did that were very straightforward. Like we had the jeans, 3 fits. We had a classic T-shirt in 1 fit, but we had a slightly rigid. We had like 3/4 sizes.
Okay.
So, but we had more of them. I think we had 5 or 6 sizes. So you could kind of adjust your fit if you like it on the slimmer side, or it's like, actually, if you like it a bit looser, go up a size or go up 2 sizes, so you could get it a bit more. That was like our USP, like on the T-shirt. But again, they were like,
it's a nice one.
We did white navy, grey marl. They were packaged nicely. We had these old shoe trolleys that we'd picked up from Grenson, and they were all bagged up like coffee bags. You know, we did like pizza boxes, we did coffee bags, we did all of that stuff. But again, what was stock? What packaging was stock that we could do, that we could control, that you could get? And it was novel, you know, for people. But
it's that whole thing about those restrictions, developing creativity, you know, and the restriction was the cash flow, which in some ways you had created yourself because of underpricing things. But it meant that you were creative in that way that made you different.
Yeah, I mean, really fond of those things. And I remember for a time just thinking, gosh, when we were on an upward trajectory, there were lots of ideas for like, okay, we could just have a jean shop, and like, could we go in and sell like denim coffee, or denim, like jeans, white T-shirt. And we had these like horn key rings that were super nice, made up in the Lake District. There was like a fish and a whistle made from like stag horn and stuff. So there were all these little things that we had, like gifts and trinkets that were nice. And take little, like, you know, when you're on a high street and you see like tiny units and you're like, nothing could exist there. But then maybe an artisan baker goes in and you're like, it's brilliant. It's just like a row of, you know, shelves with the loaves on, sold by 3:00, shut next day. And it's like, well, could you do that for jeans, T-shirts and coffee, and give people an excuse and create some interesting retail spaces? So there were lots of ideas to do that with a store. Just you've got to keep people coming back in. But I think people loved that, the human touch of what we did. That was definitely the thing.
Oh, for
Retail,
for sure.
Keep it human, and people come back in. They enjoy it.
And so if you were to take one thing, like, what is it that you are most looking forward to when you get to that place? You've got your product. You've got your jeans, you've got your T-shirt, you've got your hats, you know, you've got that basic product list, and you've got your shop. What is the thing that you are most excited about when you think about that in the future for Peace?
For Peace, it's the people.
Nice. Yeah.
The people, the conversations. I love talking to people. I get we probably all are to a certain extent. You can be a bit shy, but when you find a subject that you love, you suddenly become like, this is amazing, and you want to share it with people if they show an interest. I think shops attract like-minded people. That's lovely to then be talking to like-minded people, and people tell other people. It's like, it's people. You're just sharing that. People. We met some very good people through having the shops, conversations that we'd never have had otherwise. And I've always loved retail. I think it's retail and product are just, I have very, very fond memories of from being a kid and beyond. And I think even Esk, like my boy, loves shops. He's 6, but or coffee shops, but it's people. And I think we've been, we're kind of well known. Not that we're famous, but you know, you get on a circuit where it's lovely chatting to people, and this what happens from that is great.
It's something we were talking about briefly. We touched on it at the end of the last one, where I've been mulling over this idea, and it's in the future, but it's this idea of not having a high street store, but kind of carrying on from that idea that you and I spoke about. And I don't know if we spoke about it on an episode of Thread Equity or whether it's just been back and forth. This idea that there were these informal gatherings, you know, that were Paul Smith orientated at the Peacock in Redmar, which that pub doesn't exist anymore. But I love this idea of having a space that's totally different, that's out in the country, what I've kind of expanded on from that is this idea of a pub, and you can have classic car meets, so it brings community together. But also within that pub, if you imagine a gastro pub, and you know how you have glass panes into the kitchen of a lot of these high-end restaurants. So you have this pub, and it does have a bar downstairs and everything. Upstairs would be like a members-only club that if you bought something from Barnfield, that immediately gives you access into that members-only club that can be used as a meeting space and a working space. But downstairs is where some of the tailoring would happen. You know, if I get to the point where I'm doing bespoke as well. So you would come to this location, you would have your fitting, have a lovely meal, you'd have probably conversations with other people there, do your fitting, and be able to actually see some of the product being made there as well. Now, I know hospitality is in a terrible place at the moment, so I think I'm definitely throwing too much in one bucket there. But I love this idea of having this to aim for, because I've been so direct to consumer, so digitally focused. I love the idea of having a space that can actually bring people together in a place that they want to be together.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, because I know the Peacock stories that they were just very. They have a legacy that lives on when you talk to anyone that was at those. I mean, really, they were just going for a pint at the pub, but it was a certain pub that was in this place, and time makes things more mysterious, which is great. Physical space is great. I've been toying with the idea for Peace, because whilst we sell jeans, tennis is a love of mine, and there is that, like, how do you build a community? I don't want Peace to be necessarily denim heads, because I'm not a denim head. But I want denim heads to be able to pick up a pair of Peace jeans and go, yeah, like, they're not for me, but yeah, like, decent.
There's quality. Yeah, sure.
But how I incorporate, like, tennis, because a lot of my references for jeans have come from a period, like that 90s period, where, like, tennis was a big thing, but it was just kind of this informal, slightly counterculture 90s thing. And Peace Racket Club, and also I was talking to a colleague the other day, and we were talking about just going where the people are, and actually, you know, there are people are playing paddle and tennis, and I love tennis, and then the Peace Racket Club, just to have another thing that you can have just on the side. It's like a community social gathering thing, but some of my references are they're tennis referenced. Like you were talking about the Steve McQueen, and then you have the woman in the bikini, and you're like, oh, the bikini, like, yeah, I get it. But where they sit. So just toying with that, but then doing it in Porto. Run clubs are everywhere. Certainly just got back from a trip to Barcelona. Great run clubs. Berlin, loads of run clubs. London, huge number of running clubs. The tennis ones are emerging slowly, but Porto's just in a different place economically, culturally, and you're like, would it work here? And you're like, maybe maybe not. Does it actually need to work here? As long as there are enough people that I play with that you can create again, it's creating a visual around it. Long term, I think Lisbon works, but that, like, how do you get to a space? What are the steps to get to a space before you shell out the money to open a space?
So what's the MVP? And I think that what I like about the Peace Racket Club, or for instance, what I've been talking about with the classic car meets, like, because I can reach out to pubs, and one of the things I was thinking about doing was almost like not an evening with, but a lunchtime with, and so you have, ideally I've thought about like Sir Ranulph Fiennes, having lunch with Sir Ranulph Fiennes, and he's telling you about the adventures that he had, and you're surrounded by like-minded people. You're having this great food. It's a classic car meet on the outside. Now, you could do that in a pub, as long as you could say, I guarantee I can get you 10 to 15 people together. Then you could book out a section of the pub on a Saturday. So that's a step in the direction of that. And then I was thinking about almost like a cooperative, because there's no way that I would have the time to be able to run a gastropub and all the experience or expertise to learn that either. So to have a space where I'm like, this is the space, this is the shared vision for this space.
Yeah.
And have someone come in to run the pub and the restaurant side of things. I run the tailoring and fitting side of things. Someone else maybe runs the members lounge and the co-working space as a business.
Oh, wow, this is big.
But what I love about it's my brain's just gone ding 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 and had all sorts of ideas. I think I spoke before about liking to get involved with things that are expansive and that create opportunity, and that's where my brain is, and that would certainly do that. But what I like about like the classic car meets, for instance, is that it's bringing community together with Barnfield as a platform, like almost like a sponsored by, but it's in no way transactional.
Yeah.
So it doesn't interfere with the community. We're coming together because we have a shared vision of the world and an aesthetic. There's no transaction here. Sure, if you want to buy something in Barnfield, it's always going to be available for you, and that's great. But this is a separate but connected thing, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's really important to have that distinction of the two, so they don't cloud each other. But that they make enough sense that can be
together. Yeah. And I think that the racket club, the racket club does, especially when you've described to me almost like, the guy in his jeans, t-shirt, brown leather jacket, gets out of his classic 911 with his sports bag over the shoulder, and he's into the tennis club. It's a lovely aesthetic.
Yeah. I think so. I think it works, and then I just like it. I like the idea of bringing people together. In a way, shops jeans are an excuse to have a space or multiple spaces. That would be great to bring people together. And I think because you can do so much in there, like I feel like people, birds of a feather, want to flock together. They then need an excuse or the migration call to all come together. And I think a retail or a brand or a gathering does that. And
I think it's nice to be the anchor and to create the platform for that. It's nice to be that driving force, because more often than not, you're like, well, this doesn't exist at the moment. I want to make it exist, and I'm not going to rely on someone else to make it happen.
Yeah. I wonder what that is, because it's not for everyone. Not everyone wants to.
No, that's true.
I've been
I don't
talking to a chap who's making a shoe brand, and he started to make some garments, and he's had a successful brand before, but in the supplement space. So quite different. Supplements are easy. It's a bit more mechanical. You order, they come box packaged, ready to go. Like, they're all the same. And he was like, oh, this is like hard, isn't it? Like, everything changes and people say one thing and da-da-da. And I was like, yeah, it kind of is. But he's doing it, but he's at that stage where he's sharing everything. Everything's new for him. Probably similar to yourself. It's like the store is our first time would marketing agency, digital marketing agency with Mark Woolman 2.0 be the same? You get a bit long in the tooth, don't you? And trying to...
Yeah, I know what you're saying. And actually, yeah, I'm glad you brought that back up, because we will bring this to a close. But like I did mean to say, it's difficult because when you were doing it for album, that public sharing and everything was authentic. It was exciting because it was authentic because of where you were at the time. Whereas now, to do it, it's almost like you'd need to do it in a different way for it to be authentic to you. But don't forget, it's still authentic and new to other people.
Yeah.
It's this whole the idea of like, you're not just doing things. We spoke about this last time, doing things for your peers or for people who are learning.
Yeah.
And it's remembering that it's new to other people.
Yeah, it's hard. I think that's definitely something fundamentally within me. So I've just been doing a piece of strategy work through something else that we developed, and I found a lot of the insights were nothing new that I hadn't heard over the X number of years that I've been doing it. So I kind of dismissed. There was a great deal that I dismissed because I'd climbed all those bits, and I was like, actually, cut to the chase. That's what it's about. But for everyone else, all of that was actually quite interesting. And what I was saying, I think, it felt so basic or foundational or essential that it was overlooked. It was like an obvious for them, but it returned to it for me because all of the, like, methods are many, principles are few. And it was just like, return to the principles. Like, the fundamentals will set you in really good stead to build a foundation off. But you're so overawed by all the methods. Oh my gosh, there's this machine, there's this, there's that, and the other kind of thing. And it's like, seen all that.
Yeah.
Actually, I want a really good factory that answers the phone, that welcomes me in, that lets me make a cup of tea. I don't sit in a room. All of those things that are human.
Yeah.
That you kind of, methods are many, principles are few. And we've had combos. This will be my parting thing of, they're a big fan of the special forces. And they say it's not difficult to get into the special forces. You just have to they are exceptional at doing the fundamentals. And I was like, that's, okay, how do we become exceptional at doing the fundamentals?
That's the same as jiu-jitsu. What's the saying? Don't fear the jiu-jitsu practitioner who has this huge library, and fear the one who practices the same move over and over and over and over again. Yeah, because they will get you every time.
Yes.
And it's true. It's true.
And I think that same with making clothes and doing the marketing, just like principles, always returns, know the principles, return to the principles.
Yeah.
And from there build.
Well, as much as I was just saying, okay, let's bring this to a close, and we will, but just saying that's exactly what we were talking about, because you were doing that with the retail side of things, having it considered, having your bread and butter products and having your novelty in there, smatterings of novelty, and making sure the focus is right with that. With your marketing, you were communicating the behind the scenes, and you were making it human. With your retail spaces, you were community focused, and you were making it human, and you were focused on that customer experience. And I think if you can bring those together, that gives you a nice kind of summary of retail, but also of this podcast.
Yeah, I think so. And we should talk about human next time.
Yeah, let's do it. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
And we'll catch up next time.
See you later.
See you later. Bye-bye.